last time we left off, it was right before the family's first meal together. So let's pick back up there. Oh. Sorry, lost a item. There we go. Have some tea to start off with. We walked up to the huge double doors that led to the dining room. Genji-san knocked. A bit more adjustment. There we go. I have brought the children. Please pardon the intrusion. The doors were opened and we were invited inside. The dining room, which looked exactly like you'd imagine a rich person's dining room to be, had a super long table that was obviously positioned with no purpose other than to make the guests conscious of their rank. Our parents were already sitting in accordance with without ordering. "You're late, brats. Hurry up and take a seat." The old bastard pressed us to sit. The only gaps in that group of people were the spots we were supposed to sit, which only made us feel our tardiness all the more. The seat at the head of the table, called the incipient's chair, was for the most highly ranked, reserved for grandfather. It was still empty. He probably wanted to show up last for dramatic effect. From the perspective of someone facing the incipient's chair head-on, the seating order went from left to right, with the lower-ranking seats progressing in rows of two further away from it. So the left-hand side of the first row, closest to the incipient's chair, was where Uncle Kraus should have sat since he was the second highest in rank. It looked like he hadn't arrived yet, so that seat was empty. Across from his chair on the right side of the first row sat the eldest daughter of the family, Aunt Ava, who was the third highest in rank. The left-hand side of the second row was for the fourth highest in rank. There sat my damn dad, Rudolph, the third of the siblings. Across from him on the right side of the second row sat Aunt Rosa, the youngest sibling. At this point, you might expect their husbands and wives to come next. But nope, that left-hand seat in the third row, rank number 6, belonged to Jessica. Opposite her was George Aniki. I sat next to Jessica, and Maria sat across from me. Then finally, next to me on the left-hand side of the fifth row, sat Aunt Natsuhi, the 10th highest in rank. Opposite her was Uncle Hideyoshi. Next to Aunt Natsuhi in the 6th row, in the final seat on the left-hand side, sat Kirie-san. The seat opposite to Kirie-san was empty, even though silverware had been set there and everything. According to this ranking system, that spot was where Aunt Rosa's husband should be sitting. Even though he wasn't supposed to be coming, his place was made up. Normally, ranking systems of this sort give spouses equal position to their partners, but the Ushiromiya family system was unique. Maybe it's a remnant of male chauvinism if you start with the assumption that a woman's womb is just something to be borrowed, and the children of direct descent would come first, directly followed by the grandchildren. In other words, spouses have no blood ties and are therefore placed at the end of the line. It's terrible, but by this system, my grandmother would be ranked even lower than me if she were still alive. In their youth, they obey their father. After they get married, their husband. After aging, their children. There's the old saying, women have no home in any realm. Long ago, when I was still incapable of figuring all this out, I thought it was so great that we could all chat in our little groups. Adult siblings with adult siblings and cousins with cousins. However, now that I can re-examine the seating after growing up a bit, it stirs up some very complicated feelings in me. Aunt Natsuhi, who was married to the eldest son and was the de facto number 2 in managing this family, sat to my right, which meant that she was 2 steps lower than me in the ranking order. It was hard to imagine what might be going on inside her heart. That's why I made a small apologetic gesture toward her before sitting down. "How nice to see you, Battler-kun. You've grown quite tall, haven't you?" Yep, 6 long years of eating well, sampling various cuisines, and deriving sustenance from Mother Earth's bountiful gifts. Hard work, but I pulled through. Growing just like a boy, I see. How tall are you now? I guess about 180 centimeters? But Aunt Natsuhi, that's where you're supposed to say, heck, sounds like all you did was eat. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. After a short pause, she did laugh with me, but it seemed she couldn't quite figure out what she was supposed to be laughing at. The This woman is Aunt Natsuki. She is the wife of the eldest son of the family, meaning she's my father's oldest brother's wife. Is it simpler if I just call her Jessica's mother? It feels bad to say it like this, but while I didn't exactly dislike her, I didn't particularly like her either. She hardly ever spoke with us kids, and all my memories of her involve her talking to the adults about complicated things with a scary look on her face. In fact, since we hardly ever exchange words, I spent a long time trying to figure out how I should approach her, though my efforts seem to have ended in failure. The silverware sat neatly on the table, but the meal itself hadn't been brought in yet. As a general rule, you couldn't start a meal until the person sitting at the head of the table arrived. So, as long as grandfather didn't come, lunch would be put on hold indefinitely. Not even the appetizers would arrive. Simply put, the silence in this room was caused by our parents enduring their hunger while they waited for grandfather to arrive. However, the grandfather from my memories would always show up on time to meals like this. He was the kind of person who would never be so late that it kept everyone waiting, especially after the entire group had arrived. Grandfather's pretty late. As far as I can remember, he was always strict about time. Well, that might have been true 6 years ago, but it hasn't been that way lately. In fact, he's off in his own little world so often that he doesn't even show up at family meals. Still, I figured he'd at least come down today. Then again, I feel a lot more relaxed and happy without him. Jessica! When her mother scolded her, Jessica stuck her tongue out and looked away. No way around it. Might as well wait until our host arrives. When I glanced at the clock, I saw that it was almost 12:20. Ushirimiya Kinzo, the aged family head of the Ushirimiya head family. This man could be seen in his study. The clock had already passed noon, but he didn't even attempt to rise from his seat. With his spectacles on, he built up a growing pile of books with elaborate bindings, which he then read intently. You couldn't really say that he was having too much fun to stop. Rather, he filled the room with a sense of impatience, or perhaps a sense of impending danger, as though every second wasted was a tragedy. In this sealed room, a dense dust danced through the air, which was thick with the stench of chemicals that exuded a mix of suspicious odors. These odors were somehow sweet and heavy. If anyone with a normal nose came in here, the first thing they'd do would be to open a window and ventilate this room. The knocking against the study door had been going on for a while. A voice calling "Father" sometimes mingled with the knocks. As Kinzo heaved a deep sigh, he snapped shut the old book in his hands and slammed it on the table. Then he yelled at Kraus, who was still knocking on the door. "Silence! Enough with that racket, you fool! Who told you the door would be opened if you but knocked? I'll crucify the imbecile. Do you wish to suffer the same fate?" "Father, this is the day of the family conference, which only happens once a year, is it not? Everyone's gathered down below. Please come out." Kraus called out to his father through the door. Kinzo always shut himself up in the study, hating it when nearly anyone, even his family, entered the room. For that reason, Kraus had no choice but to call to him from the corridor like this. "Blessed me not. Just who is this everyone of which you speak? Do you mean the fools trying to drag me out of here? Then kill them all. Tear them apart, use their bodies for firewood, and feed them to the witch's hearth. Put a pot in that hearth to boil the wormwood. Force the imbeciles who dare to lure me out of here to drink the broth of the apocalypse. I will soak their dregs in liquor. Where is Genji? Call for Genji. Have my demonic absinthe prepared." The whispering of the green fairy reaches me no longer. "Where is Genji? Bring him here." On the other side of the door, Kraus, Nanjo, and Genji kept waiting for the master of the house, who stubbornly refused to come out. Looks like he hates me to the core. My voice doesn't reach him anymore. Kraus shrugged as if to say it's no use, and smiled bitterly. From the beginning, he hadn't really expected his father to respond to his calls. However, since it was the duty of the eldest son, he had tried as a formality. "Kinzo-san, your sons, daughters, and grandchildren have come to see you, have they not? Could you just let them see your face, if only for a short while?" "Shut up, be silent, you dare to admonish me, Nanjo. I never told anyone to get you, I told them to get Genji. Now call for him immediately. Time is short, and the apostles are already readying their trumpets, so why can't you foolish sheep understand?" Kinzo slammed an old heavy book against the table over and over. That racket clearly expressed his great displeasure. Kinzo put his spectacles down and flew up from his chair. He spread his arms wide open as if to sing a packed opera house, as if appealing to someone, and yelled, "Why? Why is there always something in my way? I would throw it all away, I would offer up everything, and there's only one thing I ask in repayment. Oh, Beatrice, if I could see her smile but one more time, I would plunder the smiles of the earth and offer them all up to you. Oh, commanders of the legions of locusts, reap the smiles of the earth. Ah, everything is filthy, everything is irksome. Why must I suffer this impediment on this most precious of days? Call for Genji." I have no idea what he's yelling about. He's probably lost his mind by now. Cross-son, isn't it a bit harsh to say such a thing of your own father? My father is already dead. There's nothing here but a phantom of what father once was. At any rate, as long as he has no intention of coming out, there's nothing we can do. Kinzo-san. Choking coughs continued to pour from the study. I'm going back downstairs. It would be a waste to let the fruits of Goto's prized cooking talent get any colder. It's one of the few things the relatives can look forward to when they come to this house. Kraus spun around. He looked at his watch, mumbling and acting as though he had wasted time doing something he knew would be in vain. Genji-san, father is calling for you. Keep him company. Certainly. Dr. Nanjo, let's go eat. If we stay here any longer, this sweet stench will ruin our sense of taste. Without waiting for Nanjo, Kraus went downstairs. Genji urged Nanjo to go and eat. Nanjo glanced between the study door and Kraus's back as the latter disappeared down the stairs, then let out a deep sigh. Sorry, Genji-san, but please allow me to leave this in your hands. Yes, please leave it to me. Do what you can to avoid giving him alcohol. That's a habit that's far too difficult to break. Is Genji not here yet? Who dares keep Genji from coming? Ah, where's Genji? Call for Genji! Please, allow me to handle this situation here. Very well, Nanjo said back. Forgive me. Nanjo bowed slightly and descended the stairs. Genji watched him leave, then knocked on the study door. Master, it is Genji. Genji, why have you kept me waiting so long? You're alone, I trust? Correct, I am alone. Kinzo returned to his seat in the study and pressed an old-fashioned switch on the table. After a small delay, the heavy sound of the door unlocking could be heard. Kinzo was convinced that his family wanted to make a mess of his study, or perhaps someone had opened the window for some air and ended up scattering things that to him were important research materials, leaving him in a terrible mood. Kinzo had outfitted his room with a formidable lock, preventing anyone from entering without his permission and thereby sealing himself in a jail of his own making. Genji, whom he trusted the most, was relatively free to enter the room, but even that didn't always hold. If Kinzo was in a bad mood, even Genji wouldn't be able to enter. Anyone else would be limited to holding a conversation through the door, unable even to see Kinzo's face. And most of the time, what they got could hardly be called a conversation. However, this didn't trouble the rest of the family much. After all, it just wasn't worth the effort to disturb this aging family head, who was impossible to please and always stayed shut away, immersed in his research. Taking advantage of his refusal to leave the room, they supported his isolation, putting his care entirely into the hands of the servants. Genji, my usual. I'm busy. Yes, sir. Genji headed to a corner of the study. There, suspicious-looking bottles boasting venomous colors were on display. They were actually liquor, but considering the shady atmosphere of the room, one might easily suspect them of being some ghastly poison. Inside the study, the mysterious collection of books gathered by Kinzo had grown into a mountain. They were bizarre, ancient, or banned books, all of them either forbidden, cursed, or sealed. But if you tried to call them old books, Kinzo would fly into a rage and say, "Call them grimoires." There were also many mysterious objects that presumably held some meaning with regards to black magic, like candles suspiciously melted and molded into strange shapes. The constellations drawn on a certain celestial globe contained quite a few shapes that would draw puzzled looks from anyone familiar with today's night sky. The carelessly strewn about books contained many illustrations, all of them of a religious or mysterious nature, including some depicting demonically grotesque subjects or bizarre diagrams of various magic circles. And above all, a sweet, poisonous smell filled the room, profoundly assaulting the eyes and noses of those who entered for the first time. Eventually, it must surely make a person go numb and lose their grip on reality. Inside that study, Genji prepared Kinzo's usual drink with a well-trained hand. No one would even think of drinking such an ominous dark green liquid in that complex and ornate glass, unless someone first told them it was alcohol. He poured a little into the glass, then he placed a cube of sugar in a strangely shaped spoon, and poured water from a pitcher over it. Strangely, when the transparent water was poured into the dark green liquid turned a cloudy white. It was a strange optical illusion, as though the water had caused a chemical reaction and made the drink become even more unrecognizable as liquor. Then Genji added original flavors Kinzo loved, fine-tuning its taste. There was no recipe. Its success was measured only by Kinzo's mood swings when he drank it, and it had taken Genji many decades to learn how to do it right. Genji placed the glass on a tray and walked over to Kinzo. By this time, Kinzo was gazing out the window. "Here, master." "Thank you." Kinzo had regained his composure and was now unrecognizable as the shouting, screaming, yelling man from a few moments ago. Looking at this man from behind as he tilted his glass and gazed down at the scenery beyond the window, he projected a sense of dignity and intelligence. To allow Kinzo to set his glass down at any time, Genji motionlessly waited behind Kinzo and to his left, as though he were a living sideboard. Then, without averting his eyes from the window, Kinzo held out his glass. There was only a mouthful remaining. It was not a gesture intended to set it upon the tray, but a motion to hand the glass over to Genji. "Drink, my friend. Your words are too kind for me. No need for ceremony between us. Drink, my friend." "Thank you." Genji respectfully received the glass and inclined it a little to taste its contents. After that, he gulped it down. "I attempted to imitate your concoction, but no matter how I try, I cannot replicate the taste. The way you make it is pure relish." "Thank you very much. It is the fruit of your guidance, master." Kinzo smiled at his loyal subject, who refused to put aside rank even when asked to. However, he was not making fun of him. His smile was relaxed, as though chuckling at a close friend's old, unshakable habit. "We have grown old together. I stopped counting the years long ago. It is entirely thanks to you, master, that I've been able to live like this until today." Kinzo gave a faint smile, as if to say he didn't need any flattery. "Until now, you have served me exceedingly well. My sons call me eccentric. The servants that were once many have all quit in fear of me. Only you serve me even now. Your words are more than I deserve. My life will not last much longer. My sons are vultures, lazily waiting for my inheritance to fall into their hands. Kraus is a fool who squanders money like water, who throws away 2 gold coins to obtain 1. And then he has the gall to claim that he's earned money. Ava is a slave to money who thinks of me as a mere chicken. When I die, she plans to use my bones to make a broth. That dunce Rudolph just wants to fool around with women. Rosa bore the baby of a man who came from nowhere and about whom we know nothing. Jessica is incompetent and uneducated. George has none of what it takes to be a man. Battler is a fool who threw away the honor of the Oshiromiya family. And Maria is obscene to the eye. Why is the Oshiromiya blood so incompetent? Is there no one worthy to inherit the glory I built? Of course I know this is part of Beatrice's curse. I know it. You golden witch, are you trying to take revenge against me in this way? If you want to hate me, then do so. If you want to run away, then run. I won't let you go. I won't let you go. I won't let you go. You belong to me. You must always be in my arms. For all my life, you must stay in my birdcage for all eternity, whispering only to me. Beatrice, why won't you smile back at me? Beatrice! After howling, Kinzo choked once again. Genji sat the tray and glassed down and rubbed his master's back. Genji's facial expression did not change. It was always like this. Thank you, my friend. When his seemingly deranged fit subsided, Kinzo regained his composure once again. It was like seeing two different people, a wild Kinzo and a composed Kinzo living together inside one body. And so, I have decided, I cannot bear to spend my dimmed remaining years procrastinating like this. If I have one final coin to bet, then I choose to abandon it to the whims of the demon's roulette. The power of magic is always determined by the risk of the gamble. Like visiting a shrine at the Hour of the Ox in ancient Japanese sorcery, to nail a cursed doll to a tree, magical power is produced specifically because of that risk that it will be seen within the 7 days the curse takes. The greater the risk, the stronger the magic power will be. Many miracles that happened in myth might be called the crystallization of shocking magical power, with a low probability of occurrence and astronomical risk. That Moses parted the water of the sea was not a miracle of God. The risk of that desperate situation, cornered by soldiers on the Red Sea's shores, weighed upon the scales of slaughter and gave birth to that miraculous magical power. If the same thing occurred again on the same scale, the sea would surely fail to part. After all, Moses was able to magnificently summon a miracle engraved on but one of those countless innumerable results in the roulette of those with power. This is the force that can triumph over astronomical odds. Indeed, good fortune that can grasp miracles is magical power itself. To obtain this mighty power, one must face the risk of despair. Those who possess no magical power may call that desperation rather than a bet. However, people who truly do possess magical power can grasp hold of that miracle and make the enigma come into being. And if that power exists within me, I'll seize that miracle. I'll have a chance at making the wish I devoted my life towards come true. Kinzo looked up to the sky outside the window. He spread his arms as if appealing to someone up in the skies. If only I were capable of grasping that miracle. Oh, Beatrice, Beatrice, show me your lovely smile once more. No matter how much time passes, your face does not vanish. I just want to see your smile, that is all. I'll return everything you granted me. I'll return all the glory I've gained since that day. I don't need fortune, prestige, or gold. I'll return everything you gave me. I just want to see your smile. I beg you, Beatrice. His nonsensical yells became a scream and then a wail. Kinzo slumped to the floor, tearing at it with both hands. Genji had no choice but to wordlessly watch over his master's lamentations. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the family head's health is not at its best. He seemed extremely sad to not be able to share lunch with you all now that you have gathered for this event that occurs but once a year. Good, I'll let the lunch begin. Certainly. I shall begin today's luncheon. Dr. Nanjo, is father's condition really that bad? Couldn't he have at least let us see his face? It's more a problem of mood than of physical condition. And for that, there is no medicine I can prescribe. Hey, are we talking about his mood again? You've got to be kidding me. We took time out of our schedules during this damn busy autumn season just to come out and find out how he's doing. And now he's... Then you should be happy, Rudolph. You now know how he's doing. Or what, would you rather take my place and try to persuade our ill-humored father to come join us? Are you kidding? Rudolph shrugged. Apparently, though Rudolph was willing to be indignant at how self-centered his father was, he wasn't particularly disappointed to be spared a face-to-face meeting. Does it seem like his mood will improve before dinner, Krasny-san? I have no idea. If you want to know that, you should ask him directly, although I think his mood will improve faster if we don't bother him. Genji-san's the only one who can get grandfather out of a funk. It's pretty pathetic, though, making the servants deal with your own parents' bad mood. Jessica. Don't speak out of turn. She'd planned for her complaint to be heard only by her cousins, but it had reached even Krause's ears. Scolded, Jessica scowled and turned away, sulking. If he's as cranky as they make him sound, he can't be that terribly sick, right? I mean, they're saying he's in a bad mood, not that he's got no energy, which at least proves he's got his wits about him. It's because grandfather has especially strong willpower. However, that doesn't necessarily mean his body will be able to keep up. Since last year, they keep saying that he has 3 months left. If the initial diagnosis was correct, grandfather has been prolonging his life by willpower alone. It's right for us to worry about him. Lunch started with the family head's seat still empty. The man who should be sitting there had already grown old, and the brilliant glory with which he had rebuilt the Ushiromiya family in the span of a single lifetime was being forgotten. Even though they were beginning that meal with that seat still empty, no one felt it was that odd anymore. The Ushiromiya Family Conference was held once every year on the first weekend of October. If a normal family were to hold a so-called family conference, you'd expect it to be nothing more than a reunion of rarely seen relatives who greet each other around buckets of sushi or something. However, part of the family's great fortune had been lent out to grandfather's children, and no one in this family was considered an adult until they had met with success in business, so this meeting literally was a conference. How much of the fortune was invested, what sort of business was conducted, how much of the profit was earned, as a result, how much of the fortune borrowed from the main family could be repaid, or possibly how much more would be borrowed for future business ventures. What lessons had they learned, and what could they learn from their mistakes? It seemed that topics like this were discussed very seriously in the past. My dad said it was like lying on a bed of nails. Apparently, it used to be a very serious family meeting when people were bathed in scornful and angry voices, and some people even got slapped besides their age. However, that had become a thing of the past. Now, with everyone pursuing their own business ventures and achieving success, it was becoming more of a normal yearly get-together. Even so, telling grandfather about recent events was extremely stressful. So while it was nothing more than a simple get-together for his grandchildren, it was still a real stomachache for our parents. The absence of the man who is the source of all this trouble, regardless of the reason, probably made today's lunch taste much more delicious. The phrase, "while the demon is not around, everyone can relax," comes to mind. Anyway, let's introduce Jessica's father, whose face I haven't seen for 6 years. The man sitting to my father's left is his older brother and Jessica's father, Uncle Krause. Now that we've gotten used to the string of weird names, our perspective is totally skewed, so Krause doesn't actually seem that bad. It even starts to sound kind of cool. Just like with Aunt Natsuki, I didn't have many memories of speaking with Uncle Krause. He had never been one to chat to children, and I felt like he was always talking with the adults just like Aunt Natsuki. According to my father's gossip, he was a spiteful and violent man. If what he said is true, Uncle Krause used to be very domineering from his position as the oldest sibling, and was despised by all the younger siblings. Though despite that, the siblings all seemed to be chatting happily together. Well, even if the relationship was bad when they were children, sometimes when people grow up and live apart from each other, their relationships change. That's probably what this was. After all, they all had children of about the same age. By sharing the same family environment, they probably profited by exchanging opinions. Maybe because of that, a short while ago, the circle of parents began to discuss the exams Jessica and I would be taking. Jessica, in order to escape questions about exams from my father on her left, purposely faced right when firing off a rapid series of comments, not giving him any chance to get a word in. Moving on, let's look at the end opposite from Krause and the others. In the very last seat at the table, an old gentleman with a sturdy physique sat facing Kyrie-san. This was my first time meeting him. I'd only just been introduced to him, but it seems he's grandfather's personal doctor, a man named Nanjo. I heard he used to own a huge clinic on the nearby island of Nijima, but he turned it over to his son and began living a life of leisure in his old age. He had known grandfather since the very beginning when the mansion was first constructed on this island, and had built up a relationship over several decades. I thought at first that the two of them might have gotten to know each other through grandfather's suspicious hobbies, but it seems that he was actually grandfather's chess partner. I see. That kind of hobby seems very like our grandfather with his love of all things Western. Nando's probably the only person who could enter Rokkenjima despite being neither a family member nor a servant. He looked like a calm old gentleman as he listened to the discussion between Kira and the other women who sat near to him. Considering how long he stayed by the side of her short-tempered grandfather, his generous heart was probably nothing to laugh at. Still, even if he was a family doctor, having anyone outside the Ushiromiya family attend the family conference was a little odd. It made me think that grandfather's condition might have worsened so much it'd be a major topic of discussion at today's conference. After all, George said something like that just a second ago. Something about how we've been getting continuous reports since around last year that grandfather didn't have long to live. It's nasty to think about it, but consider how rich grandfather is. At the time of his death, his wealth will probably be released, probably along with a fair share of our parents' stomach acid, and it'll lead to ulcers for everyone. After all, this sort of thing just gets messier when there's more wealth to be divided. There's a good chance they'll be talking about stuff like that at the family conference. Still, it's not like it's anything to do with us kids. Finally, even though he hadn't shown up, let me introduce our grandfather. The person who should be sitting in that incipient's chair is Ushiromiya Kinzo. It really sucks. Everyone else in the family has these weird names, but he's got this perfectly normal one himself. If only his name was written, but he let us call him Goldsmith or something, I'd totally freak out. As you can probably guess by now, he's a frightening person with an extremely short temper. I'm one of his grandchildren, not a son, and I haven't seen him since elementary school. Thanks to that, I have no memory of being beaten myself, but our parents were apparently raised with an iron fist. That earlier conversation between my dad and Uncle Kraus about who should go convince grandfather to come down seems pretty darn funny once you know their background. You can't really tell grandfather's story without covering that pivotal event from before the Showa era. Until the Meiji and Taisho eras, the Ushiromiya family was great and prosperous. They owned several spinning mills, making them rich enough to just double over laughing every day as the money kept rolling in. Incidentally, grandfather was a member of a branch family and pretty much nothing to do with the main family. Not only was he way down the list of people who could inherit the headship, but had hardly any contact with the glamorous main family. However, during the Great Kanto earthquake in the year Taisho 12, the mansion owned by the Ushiromiya family in Odawara was flattened. The spinning mills in Tokyo were all burned down in a huge fire, and the Ushiromiya family lost most of its wealth and family members in an instant. So once they started trying to figure out who the successor to the Ushiromiya family should be, they apparently found no one remaining except Kinzo and his branch family. In Kinzo's later reminiscences, he referred to this as good fortune so great that it overturned fate. With that, grandfather's boring everyday life did a 180. He was entrusted with reviving the dying Ushiromiya family, which had lost nearly all of its wealth. However, just because he had been entrusted with this task doesn't mean he could accomplish it. Apparently, those around him weren't really expecting much. However, this is when grandfather began displaying his extraordinary talent and good luck. Grandfather used all of the family's remaining wealth, as well as everything from the hair on his head to his toenails, as collateral in order to borrow a massive amount of money. Once he'd built up a gigantic war chest, he immediately invested in businesses. It was like someone tumbling down a hill on a bike without any brakes, and then jumping onto a neighboring bike and then another one, just like some crazy street performance. I'll bet everyone thought grandfather had no business ability whatsoever. However, after several miracles and turns of good fortune with coincidences piling up and every chance taken advantage of, he was suddenly in control of powerful connections with the occupying forces. At that time, MacArthur and the GHQ were the ultimate authority in Japan. Grandfather, in the twinkle of an eye, began succeeding in business under the protection of the occupying forces, quickly becoming very rich. By this point, it's probably safe to say that information, not luck, saved the day. He must have made some seriously deep connections with the occupying forces. Grandfather knew beforehand about emergency demands that would be made for the Korean War. No, it was more than that. He must have predicted those emergency demands from the very beginning when he started investing his money. The history books make it sound like all of Japan made a large profit of the emergency demands during the Korean War, but that isn't actually true. Only a very limited number of the super rich played the money game and made an easy profit. Most of the citizens remained poor. In other words, grandfather was a member of this extremely lucky group of winners. I'm pretty sure this all happened during the year Showa 25 or so. The Great Kanto earthquake happened in Taisho 13 or so. That means grandfather was able to revive the near-dead Ushirimiya family in only about 20 years to a level even higher than it had ever been before. With that, you'd think he'd revive the main family in Odawara, but for some reason he went and did something as crazy as buying an entire small island in the Izu archipelago. Buying an entire island is not something that you can ordinarily do today. However, grandfather was clever. He contacted the GHQ and applied for the establishment of a marine resource base. He acquired this island as a business property, then tossed that project aside and claimed it as his own plot of land. After the war, there were prevention measures against food shortages, and having the sponsorship of the GHQ meant that nobody could oppose him. From what I've heard, the Tokyo metropolis of that day offered this land to him practically for free. Later, Tokyo made difficulties by telling Kinzo to return the land, but the pushy GHQ intervened. Anyway, it seems that under-the-table bribes did their work well. In the end, the city gave up in frustration. Grandfather, with considerable skill and good luck, managed to weather the stormy seas of that period, obtaining a vast fortune and his own island. Of course, it probably wasn't all luck. He was obsessed with all things Western, which helped him cultivate his English skills. He was able to use this to advantage and sink his teeth into the GHQ. A mansion was built on this island soon after. This mansion, in fact. Grandfather, with his love of the Western style, made this once uninhabited island a canvas upon which he could realize his dreams to his heart's content. He now had the Western mansion of his dreams, overflowing with emotion and atmosphere, and a beautiful garden featuring all sorts of roses. And he had a private beach where nobody other than himself would ever be permitted to leave a footprint. This would be a dream come true for any boy. After that, he made good use of his huge fortune, becoming a large stockholder in the extremely stable iron and steel industry, and was able to live an easy and comfortable life by just using the dividends. Well, he's just that incredible. This kind of person usually has the ability to foresee and predict the future, or at least that's how they're portrayed after the fact. But grandfather denies all of that, repeatedly saying that he was simply blessed with extraordinary luck. Anyway, even a lord like that can't help but grow increasingly eccentric when locked up alone on an island, where all his dreams are made real. Everyone knows that he's had a Western obsession from the start, but none of our parents really know when his bizarre black magic hobby began. Did his love of black magic begin way back when he became fascinated with everything Western, or did his miraculous search of good luck while reviving his family cause him to feel a mysterious power in himself? At some point, grandfather began to make the research of black magic his life's work. He filled his study up with suspicious books, chemicals, and magical items as he became increasingly bizarre. From what I've heard, those around him warmly watched over him, figuring that someone who had achieved success in life had a right to do as he pleased, but there's no way that's true. They're probably just creeped out thinking that's disgusting, I don't want to get involved. Anyway, that agitated period was an age of big gambles, with both opportunities and risks. Let's say grandfather was born in this time period. He would have had no opportunities and would have probably have advanced like a chess piece from mandatory education to college, at a leisurely pace, never becoming more than an average salaryman. If that happened, he'd probably have sat somewhere happily talking behind his boss's back. No, not in a fancy dining hall like this, more like at a table in some bar. Then again, I'll bet this family conference would be a whole lot more relaxing if that were the case. Okay, that's enough about the old geezer. More importantly, let's talk about this incredible lunch. I'm already convinced by that sashimi salad appetizer. Goda-san's an excellent chef. Plus, these fish were caught in the adjacent seas, weren't they? They're totally different from the sashimi you get at the supermarket. Hey, quit it, Balor. Your upbringing will be exposed. Everyone let out a big laugh. Damn it, you say that even though you love those cheap pubs. Haha, I've eaten at many unusual places because of work, but this stands right up there with the best of them. I'll be willing to bet Goda-san used to be pretty well known in those circles. Well, I don't know the details, but stuff got complicated at the long-standing hotel he used to work at, what with them opening a new establishment with the same name and breaking into factions, or whatever it was. In the middle of that, he was apparently focused to retire. forced to retire. At that time, Mom just happened to be sending out job offers for a servant. As Gota removed the empty plates, he began to recount his own bumpy past without losing his smile. The world is a difficult place. However, thanks to the Madame, I was given a chance to display my skills as a chef once again, this time for the Ushiromiya family. Although I enjoy experiencing the smiles of a larger number of people, I also find it quite entertaining to perform more delicate work that can please the limited number of those who have employed me. All this is a thanks to the opportunity given to me by the Madame. Gota-san respectfully bowed his head towards Aunt Natsuhi. That's because you were the most talented of the applicants. The decision was purely objective, not based on personal feelings, so there's no need to thank me. Dang, why does Aunt Natsuhi always have to sound so indifferent? If only she spoke with a bit more kindness, she might leave a different impression. Shannon-chan and Kumasawa-san entered from the hallway with a serving cart. Please excuse us. Now then, let us move on to today's dessert. Gota-san and the others laid the beautifully adorned dessert out in front of us all. I guess it's true when they say you have another stomach for dessert. I thought I'd already filled up on delicious food, but as soon as I laid eyes on that dessert, my stomach started yelling more. I don't know much about desserts, but this looked really good. A white pudding-like substance was garnished with 2 shades of red sauce, and elegant rose petals adorned the dish. Normally, during a high-class meal like this, you're supposed to wait for the chef to extol the virtues of this particular meal before eating. However, Maria was completely indifferent to strict rules like that, so she got excited by this beautiful and delicious-looking dessert, jumping into the fray as soon as it was placed before her. Aunt Rosa scolded her, calling it bad manners, but George responded by saying, Now, it's okay. Ooh, this part's sour! This part's sour! Battler, this one's no good! Maria exclaimed as she sampled the 2 colored sauces. What? Are some good and some bad? Okay, I'll give it a go. Apparently one sauce was sweet and the other sour. Despite it being bad manners, I also stuck my little finger in and licked it. Oh, one of the sauces was sour enough to make you pucker up. If it were yellow, I'd have suspected lemon, but I couldn't guess what kind of sourness would be red. I decided to ask Shannon, who was putting away the serving cart behind us. Shannon-chan, what type of sauce is this sour stuff? Shannon-chan hesitated. Maybe her job was just to set the table, so she doesn't really know. Still, even considering that, she seemed pretty stressed. Maybe I shouldn't have asked. Or did they use some ingredient that we'd be better off not knowing about? While Aunt Natsuhi made a gesture that seemed to indicate an oncoming headache, Kumasawa-san, who was setting the table at the opposite seat, began to chuckle. What do you think we made it out of? Oh, it'll shock you. I don't have a clue. Wait a sec, Kumasawa-san, that laugh's pretty creepy. So what is it? Don't tell anyone, okay? Listen very carefully. Kumasawa-san leaned across from the other side of the table. I leaned forward myself when she asked. Their interest cost, Jessica, George, Aniki, and of course Maria also put their ears closer. Ooh, what? What? Quickly! You see, the sour part is made from juice squeezed from a mackerel! Ho ho ho! What? Mackerel? That's crazy, we all thought, horrified. Only Maria accepted it, nodding sagely. Ooh, mackerels are sour. This is what comes out when you squeeze them. When Maria started clamoring that mackerel were sour, the adults were unable to contain their laughter. Only Aunt Rosa, her face red, whispered to Maria that mackerel is only sour once prepared as shimesaba. Now I totally remember. Kumasawa-san was always like this, wasn't she? I think I remember her tricking me too in all sorts of ways when I was young. The most lethal has got to be that one. Those flimsy black things in Chinese dishes? They're kikurage mushrooms. She told me they were penguin meat, and I went all around school like a smartass telling everyone, didn't I? Kumasawa-bachan, you sure haven't changed. You know Maria's gonna believe it now, right? Oh, it's just a joke. Now Gota-san's going to tell us the sauce really is, isn't he? Gota looked a little put off about his masterpiece being laughed at for such a bizarre reason, but after clearing his throat once, he introduced the dessert to us. Well then, allow me to introduce our dessert. After seeing how much you enjoyed the rose garden earlier today, I finished this panna cotta in a rose garden style. The rose petals scattered across were selected just now from that very rose garden. The sauce is a combination of 2 reds, strawberry and rose hips. Please enjoy this mixture of the strawberry sweetness and the rose hip sourness. Furthermore, the rose petals are merely decorative, so please avoid them while you eat. With that said, please enjoy. Whoa, man, I almost want to applaud before eating. Just like with medicine, reading the detailed description on first seems to make it work a whole lot better. As Gora-san elaborated on the details of this dessert, it started to feel even more appetizing. Seriously, should you call him subtle or just talented? This dessert was probably planned from the beginning, but taking the hint when we all stopped in front of the rose garden earlier today, he displayed an incredible and timely awareness by just adding a few rose petals from that garden. This combination of sweet and sour was also exquisite. If it was just sweet, you'd get used to it and bored halfway through, but if you reach the sour sauce at that point, you'd get a really vivid taste. And then once you return to the sweet sauce, all the sourness in your mouth would be replaced with enjoyable sweetness. I'm sure everyone else felt the same way. Every time Gora-san passed by one of our seats, someone praised the taste in his presentation. How is it, madame? Splendid as always. It is worthy of entertaining our guests. I am most grateful for your words. Madame, did you know? I've heard that rosehip has the ability to cure headaches. I thought that you in particular would appreciate it, so I had it specially prepared. Is that so? Thank you. See, didn't I tell you, Natsuhine-san? Rosehip is great for headaches. So it seems. I do hope it actually helps. Ah, Gora-san, I love ya. Hey, later on, why don't you tell me how they're treating ya? Or if you can't, just let me know what sort of salary you'd like. Having your talent confined to the small island is sacrilege to humanity's cooking culture. What do you think about working your craft for my company and delighting all our customers? Haha. Hideyoshi-san, are you trying to steal away our Gora? Now that won't do at all. We'd better start treating Gora better or he'll get snatched up. Yes, you really should. If you don't, someone's gonna grab him and you'll be stuck with 3 days of Kumasawa-style mackerel cooking a day, won't you? Ho ho, that's harsh. It seems someone's holding a grudge against me. Everyone let out a huge laugh. According to Jessica, Kumasawa-san's mackerel jokes were a running gag that our parents had long since gotten used to. Kumasawa-san often claimed that mackerels had precious nutritious value and could slow aging, make people smarter, and more. Supposedly, while it couldn't stop the outward signs of aging, it helped prevent it on the inside. Since she was still spirited enough to tell these kinds of jokes at her age, there must be something to that theory. Oh. In that case, if you'll excuse me, prepare yourself for tonight's dinner. I'll be cooking plenty of mackerel dishes for you all, so you better look forward to it. We sure will. Can't wait to get all puckered up from tonight's shimisaba. That sounds wonderful. I wonder if they'll be serving any good Japanese sake. Oh, we certainly will. Haven't you heard of Rokkanjima's famous mackerel shochu? Kumasawa-san, together with Shannon-chan, bowed and pushed the serving cart away. It was pretty funny to watch Gora-san, who looked like his show had totally been stolen, explain in a serious voice that we would be having calf steak for dinner. Kumasawa-san, thanks for doing that back there. As she pushed the serving cart, Shannon bowed her head very deeply. Whoa, I haven't done anything like that requires thanks. Kumasawa may have played dumb, but she had obviously understood and saved Shannon in the nick of time. Back when Battler had asked about dessert, Shannon had unfortunately hesitated. There may have been several ways to dodge the question, but all of them required some quick wits. Shannon, who hesitated when hard-pressed for a response, was always suffering because of this small weakness. If only Shannon had a little of the craftiness needed to cleverly shake off a mistake like Gora, her life would have been a bit easier. The fact that she could perform other tasks flawlessly made this weakness even more unfortunate. However, there were some who understood Shannon's honest nature, her inability to gloss over a mistake and draw attention away from it. That was why Kumasawa had smoothly come to her rescue. I just heard from Genji-san that there will be a change in the afternoon shifts. I believe you were given a break until this evening. Ho ho ho. I'm jealous. Oh sorry, I haven't checked the shift chart yet. Yes. I was thinking I might start cooking some mackerel in the oven. If you don't mind, I would be happy if you would help out a bit before your break. Yes, I would be delighted to help. To Shannon, Kumasawa's like a mother among the servants. The dining hall needed to be cleaned up, so we were chased out. Instead, tea was being served in the parlor. Apparently, they'd prepared the black tea that Aunt Rosa had bought for Aunt Natsuki. Maria said she also wanted to have some black tea, but my old bastard said she couldn't and told us children to go play outside. Balor-kun, why don't we all go for a walk outside? Go ahead and take a look at the roses or something, but keep a close eye on the weather. The sky's still clear, but the weather report kept on talking about rain. Ooh, I want to go to the beach, Oh, that sounds wonderful. Playing on a sandy beach isn't something you get to do often, is it? Ah, good point. Okay, let's all go to the beach then. Oh, let's go. Maria, be careful not to get your clothes wet. Or your shoes. Ugh, won't get wet. That obedience is so cute. Battler-kun, make sure you keep an eye out for Maria-chan, okay? Sure, leave it to me. Hey, you're pretty obedient and cute yourself listening to Kyrie like that. Why don't you also listen to me obediently for a change? Ha! Hell no. Let's go, everyone. Come on. The children flew out of the parlor. They were replaced by Genji, who pushed a serving cart in and prepared to serve the tea. The parlor was filled with a sublime aroma which delighted everyone while they waited to sate their thirst. Ha ha ha. Rudolph's family certainly seems close. It's a wonderful thing. Quit it. We're no match for your family, Aniki. That's true. You've raised Jessica-chan to be so adorable. I imagine that's yet another fruit of your talents at education and training, Natsuhine-san. Thank you. Natsuhi answered coldly. The conversation broke off then, and the parlor fell silent. Maybe Hideyoshi couldn't bear the silence, because he broke it himself in an exaggerated gesture. Still, they still do grow fast. I thought they'd be kids forever, but they start getting huge all of a sudden, and then they're adults like us. Battler-kun looks like a completely different person now. His body has grown much bigger, but he's still just a kid. Though you could say the same about my husband. I wonder where the border between child and adult is. I still don't feel as though I've grown up. Isn't that pitiful? That's not something the mother of a child should say. That's right. We're not children anymore. We're all adults now, so I wish we could talk together on an intellectual level rather than an emotional one. When Ava smiled with sharp sarcasm, everyone seemed to get more tense. It felt as though that pleasant tea aroma had been tossed out the window. Since long ago, we've always endeavored to engage in intellectual conversations. It seems that your sarcasm occasionally misses its mark. Just as it always has. Oh, what is it you've always endeavored to do? My. I wish I could wrap those words up and send them to this room a few decades ago. Right, Rosa? Rosa gave a vague smile. She knew that, whether she agreed or disagreed, she'd earned the displeasure of one of her siblings. It was a bit of worldly wisdom that had been essential for someone growing up as the youngest sibling. Quit it, Aniki. We'd better get started on our main topic while the brats aren't around. Let us make that our intellectual discussion. As Rudolph glanced over the faces of all present, some let out a small sigh and some let a small look of resignation cross their face. They were approaching the unavoidable, true agenda. Last year, his life expectancy was estimated at about 3 months, which I guess means he's got negative 9 months left now. Should we take that to mean it might suddenly happen at any time? The family head is still alive and well. The fact that you'd bring up such an inappropriate topic under the light of day makes me doubt your sanity, Rudolph-san. Still, Natsuhi-san, this is the sort of thing you can't put off until after something happens. He's still healthy now, which makes this the perfect time to talk about this. Well, we've still got time to plan. It's just a bit of financial etiquette, you might say. It seems father is the focus of everyone's concern. Dr. Nanjo, could we hear the details from you? That appears to be what everyone else is waiting for, after all. Nanjo, who had been standing by the window and staring out the rose garden, let out a single cough when he realized he was being called. Dr. Nanjo, how is father's condition? Well, to begin, allow me to start with a revision, since my estimate last year that he had only 3 months left was not borne out. No need to explain. You're saying that measuring life is only a prediction, not a promise, right? That is correct. Because of that, while I will accept everyone's repeated questions, I can by no means confirm when he will pass away. A human's life is supported by their body and their mind. If the body is weak, the situation becomes more dangerous, but if the mind is strong enough to compensate for that weakness, the effects of one condition can sometimes remain in a subdued state. So you're saying that even if his body is weak, his mind is still firm and spirited? Kyrie, sorry, but please stay quiet for a bit. I'm sorry. That is correct. Kinzo-san's body is being overwhelmed by the demon of ill health. This will hold especially true as long as he continues to partake of such strong alcohol. So he's in a crisis now because he drinks. And maybe he's lived this long because he drinks. There's Dad for you, the heavy drinker. Well then, Doctor, I know you can't give anything more than a prediction, but what do you think about Father's chances of living until this day next year? That's quite a rude question to ask about the family head. Natsuhi jumped on Eva, not even bothering to hide her astonished expression. Eva stared back daringly, but Hideyoshi realized what was going on and tried to smooth things over with a smile. Natsuhi-san, forgive her. Eva, choose your words a bit more carefully, okay? I'm sorry, I was just so concerned about Father's condition. Is that so? I hadn't realized. Dr. Nanjo, please tell us, for the sake of the beautiful love of a daughter worried about her father's lifespan. Cross laughed sarcastically, and Eva, smiling sweetly, returned an identical chuckle. You ask whether he will still be healthy next year, but as a doctor, it is very hard to say. Because while I do think this lull in his condition will continue for a while, if he suffers some kind of fit, there may be nothing we can do. After all, Rokkanjima is a solitary island. It is not as though an ambulance could quickly jump in to save him. Normally, I would want him to have him placed in a large hospital on the mainland, but Father stated that he does not want his noble research interrupted. It seems he holds a grudge over the way we tried to force him out last year. Apparently, he strongly suspects that he'll be shut away in some hospital if he goes outside. And that's how things are now. Has Dr. Nanjo been examining him? Father trusts Dr. Nanjo. It seems he can be examined when in one of his better moods. I can examine his condition, but if I try to recommend medicine or hospitalization, he refuses to listen. I've really only been able to look. It's true, some people hate doctors. Still, what a hassle. Nanjo sighed deeply. The purpose of an examination is to determine what medical treatment would be appropriate. Receiving an examination and then not following the advice given makes the whole thing pointless. So, to sum it up, he's still expected to live 3 months. There's no way to guess how long he'll continue to live while still on the verge of death. Rudolph-san, couldn't you be a little more discreet with your words? Sorry. I've always talked this way. Give me a break. I understand how Dr. Nanjo sees it. What about you, Krasny-san? To be perfectly honest, I have to disagree with Dr. Nanjo. I find it truly difficult to think of Father as a person so sick that he has only 3 months left to live. His yell is as healthy as ever, and I still get chills at the thought of his fists raining down at me. Pushing the care of your father solely on the shoulders of the eldest sibling is far from fair. Haha, in the next world, get born after me. Okay, let's get back on track. So in the opinion of our impartial and neutral doctor, it wouldn't be odd for him to go at any time. No offense to you, Aniki, but I'd rather trust the opinion of an expert in his field. Which means it's definitely not too early to start talking about Dad's assets. Father's personal funds probably reach as high as several 10 billion yen, right? But it's not as though that's all neatly gathered as ready cash. It's not as simple as simply cutting a birthday cake with a knife. That's an interesting way to put it. That's right. You sometimes get strawberries or chocolates on top of the cake, making it hard to cleanly cut into equal parts. Given that, don't you think it's important to discuss beforehand how best to stick the knife in? I cannot understand how you all can openly discuss this as though the family head is dead, even though he's still alive. Come now. Don't you see how important this is? After all, when the time comes, the inheritance of this fortune must be carried out immediately, right? Moreover, the glorious Ushiromiya house's wealth is vast. Don't you understand that careful discussion is necessary beforehand? There's a huge difference between this family's resources and your family's wealth. How rude. My birth family has nothing to do with this. He responded indignantly, though in a low voice, and the already dark atmosphere grew even more hostile. Give it a rest, Eva. Natsuhi-san, forgive us. Pardon her rudeness. Hideyoshi tried to smooth things over by glancing at both with a forced smile, but it only resulted in making the hostility between Eva and Natsuhi even more intense. It seems I'll just get in the way if I stay any longer. Please excuse me. Nanjo rose from his seat and exited the parlor. To an outsider, it may have seemed like a normal act of courtesy, but his back was watched by several glances envious of his ability to escape. After the doctor had exited and his footstep had disappeared into the distance, Crass recrossed his legs. In other words, this is what you all would like to say. Father's remaining life is short. You want to quickly enter into a practical conference concerning the distribution of the inheritance. Why are you all so eager, I wonder? Certainly, as you say, estimating and distributing the Ushiromiya family's wealth is no simple task. In that case, shouldn't we make careful and deliberate calculations? It seems to me that you are all impatient, so split up the cake tonight. Isn't that true, Rosa? What reason is there to be hasty? We aren't being hasty. However, we need to have an agreement between the siblings. It doesn't matter when we do that, but if the day father's condition worsens is approaching, discussing the matter beforehand hardly seems hasty to me. Rosa shot a glance at Eva and Rudolph. As the youngest sibling in her family, it was hard for her to be cross-examined by the eldest. Oh? Is that your true opinion? I didn't expect that the most honest and pure-hearted of the siblings would say something like that. I wonder if those two told you to say it. Quit it, Aniki. Rosa's one of Dad's kids too. She's got as much right to his inheritance as the rest of us. It's only natural that she'd be interested. After all, Dad'll definitely die, and that's not something that will happen in the distant future. On the contrary, Aniki, you're way too relaxed. It almost seems like you'd like nothing better than to turn this discussion away from the inheritance issue. What do you mean by that? Are you trying to accuse my husband of something? Calm down, Natsuhi-san. Listen to what we have to say. Nisan, I hear the times have been extremely good lately. Yes, since last year, we've been in an unprecedented boom and the yen keeps on rising. It seems that it's no longer a dream that the dollar will reach 100 yen. Also, the ruling party says that it'll establish health resort maintenance law by next year. At this moment, resort development companies across Japan are running about trying to gather as much funding as they can. You certainly seem to know a lot about it. Japan is about to experience an unprecedented boom. It'll be a repeat of the Korean War demands, the time during which Father revived the Ushiromiya family. The people of Japan have been working like mad, achieving vast economic growth and becoming the most well-off people in the world, reaching the height of our prosperity. We've reached an era where private spending is vast, which means easy money for institutions that can capitalize on that fact. The three kinds of electrical appliances no longer represent the people's needs. The people need ski resorts, golf courses, public pools, resort hotels, and theme parks. Have you gone to Disneyland, which just opened a few years ago? What an excellent theme park. It's a place where even an adult can be a kid and have fun with his family. No longer do we count our sole virtue to be selfless devotion while failing to care for our families. We have become the most prosperous people in the world, and now we can finally enjoy the benefits. Proud son, your foresight's nothing to sneeze at. When I heard that sort of thing several years ago, I thought it was crazy. But when I heard about the G5 Nations Plaza Accord, that all changed. The yen shot up, and I'll bet the price of land skyrockets soon too. It won't be long before Japan becomes the economic center of the world. You've got a great sense of the direction that world's moving, proud son. At least there can be no debate about that. I feel the same as Hideyoshi-san. Aniki, you can read it into the next decade of history. I'll bet you got that keen sense from Dad, and it's incredible. However, unlike Dad, the timing of your predictions has been a bit off sometimes, right? Nissan, you've been starting resort projects everywhere, convinced that Japan will soon see a boom, but almost all of them continue to fail. Well, I'm sure that the era you predicted will soon arrive. It seems you misread the timing of that boom. You were too early. You then panicked and tried to sell everything off, which only opened the wound even further. If your nose was really so reliable, then there should be no reason for you to sell off your property. Is this proof that you mistrust your own ability? How rude! Are you trying to insult my husband? Natsuhi's forehead creased as she rose from the sofa. Eva, paying this no heed, stared at Kraus with a confident smile. Kraus, who also maintained his confident appearance, told Natsuhi to sit down. Please stop, Natsuhi. Eva's always been incapable of talking any other way. Calm down a little, or your headache will get worse. There's proof of your lack of talent right next to us. After all, Nissan, weren't you all excited about turning this island into a resort? You built a wonderful resort hotel and beautifully maintained the garden. I'm just an amateur and don't pretend to understand, but you must have used a significant amount of money for that, right? And what is that to you? My husband's business is none of yours. Actually, that's not true, Natsuhi-san. Rokenjima doesn't belong to Aniki. It belongs to Dad. Of course, the hotel does belong to Aniki, right? In fact, we'd be more than willing to pay lodging fees for tonight. What do you think, Rosa? Well, if what I have on hand will suffice. If I can make it into a resort, this island's financial worth will rise. It is true that the expenses have piled up, but we can expect a large harvest in the future. When that happens, all of you stand to profit as well, do you not? I understand that. If the value of this island rises, that'll increase our portions when we distribute the inheritance. Of course, I won't ask you to divide the island and the mansion into 4 equal parts. We can just resolve the matter with money equal to the value of the property. If you understand that much, what about my business makes you so dissatisfied? We aren't dissatisfied, we're uneasy. In the first place, Aniki, when do you plan to open that hotel? Left this way, you won't get anything out of it except our grubby handprints, right? That's right. It's an important tool for your business, isn't it? Surely you can't keep it locked up until the moment you open it. Buildings go bad if you don't use them and air them out every once in a while. Even so, it's a bit extravagant for a guest house that we only use once a year. Right, Rosa? That's right. Considering how wonderful it is, I'm sure it will become quite popular once you open it. Oh, so the hotel you keep talking about is the guest house. It's splendid. Just as Rosa said, if you were to open it, I'm sure it would become popular. The lodging they had been guided to wasn't originally intended to serve as a guest house. It was originally constructed as a resort hotel. However, even though it was built 2 years ago, previously there was still absolutely no prospect of it opening. Nissan is just like all of your enterprises. Your attention and planning are both fabulous. Then it always becomes unmaintainable partway through and ends before you have a chance to earn any profit. You were brilliant when you saw that using this island only as a place to live was a waste. I think it was a pretty good plan to turn it into a resort that could use the prospect of marine sports, fishing, honeymoons, and the like to attract customers. If I were the oldest son, I'm sure I would have strained my brain looking for a way to make a profit off this island. But 2 full years have passed since you finished building, right? After 2 years, you still haven't had the opportunity to open it. Where's the managing company you entrusted it to? Impertinence. That is not my husband's fault. There has just been some trouble with the company that my husband contracted with. No matter how you look at it, we are victims here. And yet, the rumors we've heard about this company you hired haven't been good at all. Let's be clear about this, dear. Did you really think we wouldn't hear about how lack of payment, embezzlement, and other issues led to the project disintegrating mid-flight? We even have evidence. I don't know what kind of evidence you found, but it's all baseless. As new members in the tourism industry, it is necessary for us to lay the groundwork with various people. It is also important to investigate the trustworthiness of our partners. It's merely taken us time to meet that goal. I'll admit that in my rashness, the hotel was completed too early. However, it's not as though we are paying maintenance costs. It's a foundation that will eventually become immensely significant. Liar. I'll bet you want to liquidate it, but can't. After all, there's no reason for anyone to buy such an extravagant hotel on an isolated, empty island without any established sightseeing routes. Anyway, what about all the loans you made for this project? Even if you aren't incurring maintenance costs, the borrowed money that you can't return just keeps growing. Sorry, Kraus Nissan, but I've investigated development for this island a bit. To be honest, I haven't heard anything good either. Hideyoshi-san, I can see how you might be left with that impression by looking only at the current financial situation. However, this is a forward-looking investment. I have no choice but to admit that my prediction was mistaken, and that until now, several liabilities have been created. However, the times have finally caught up with me. I will soon regain everything that I have lost up to this point. No, actually, all of the investment that I have made until now will finally return to my possession. That's right. Just like throwing away a small fry to catch a salmon, they will come back even bigger than before. I'll accept that. The resort business will probably see an unprecedented boom before long. Oh, I don't know if it'll be enough to cover all your debt. However, Kraus Nissan, after all of your failures in the past, who exactly do you expect to provide you with funding? And this isn't some small amount we're talking about. You'll need enough funding to fill the massive hole you've dug. What are you trying to say, Hideyoshi-san? Natsu-san, please don't get angry. We looked into this too. We checked to see who might have provided Kraus Nissan with enough financing to support his recent large-scale projects, despite his string of failures. And we discovered that no such backer exists. The iron rule of the money roulette is that you bet against the loser. Aniki, you're a fairly well-known loser in this field. It's true that prosperous times are about to come, but when we looked for people who considered that enough to overlook your string of failures and also had enough for the investment, we found no candidates. So, the big question now is where you got that money from. Oh, now isn't this intriguing? And? Dear, how long do you plan to let these ridiculous remarks stand? Sit down, Natsu-san. Let's cut to the point. Aniki, you've been diverting Dad's private funds for your own businesses. There's pretty much no room for doubt. If you think we've made some kind of mistake, please feel free to explain. Rudolph, don't call it diverting funds. This is embezzlement, plain and simple. A huge crime that can be criminally prosecuted. This sort of rudeness cannot be tolerated. How can you face the successor to the Ushiromiya head family and level these absurd accusations? They aren't absurd, they're right on the mark. I'm sure he'd like to somehow make his business succeed and recover his losses, but his debt keeps getting bigger. He's just trying to cover up the failure of one gamble by making an even bigger one. It's only natural that he'd try to grab any source of funding close at hand. Let me be frank. Nissan, what you're doing is embezzlement. You're betraying Father. You know that we'll have the court settle this after it's all over, right? Do you think that kind of person has any right to call themselves the successor to the Ushiromiya head family? Father, you dare to claim that he has betrayed the family head? You no longer have the right to straddle the threshold of the glorious Ushiromiya family. Leave this place at once. Now! Get out! Natsuhi, who had previously reached the limits of her anger, shouted at Eva in a rage. She then pointed alternately at Eva in the hallway, demanding that she leave. Eva took out a folding fan and fanned herself with it, glaring maliciously at Natsuhi as though silently daring her to repeat what she'd said. However, her mouth was still smiling, curved in the shape of a crescent moon. In that unpleasant silence, Rosa gulped. Hey, Natsuhi-ne-san. To whom do you think you are speaking in such a tone? I'm speaking to the exceedingly rude sister of my husband. As a person in charge of the main family's kitchen, I cannot overlook any more of this. In charge of the kitchen? Be silent, lowly maidservant. Eva folded the fan and rose to her feet energetically. Compared to the elegance and playfulness she'd shown until a second ago, she was now unimaginably aggressive. How foolish! You stand down before Eva of the Ushiromiya family. You tell me to stand down? Me, Ushiromiya Eva, the third ranked in the Ushiromiya family hierarchy, and the one allowed to sit at the left shoulder of the head? Know your place, and then look at your shabby self in a mirror. Where is the symbol of the wing on your clothes? Where are you permitted to wear the one-winged eagle? Aren't you nothing more than a borrowed womb to house the next successor to the Ushiromiya family? Understand your place, you common housemaid. Ava's face twisted hideously as her words gouged into Natsuhi's heart like talons, wrenching at it. There were 100 ways Natsuhi wanted to respond. However, her anger and sorrow crushed her throat, and none of those words managed to make it to her mouth. Her anger had nowhere to go and became a single hot tear that slowly dripped down. What's wrong? If you have something to say, please do so. Come on. Eva faced her with a provocative gaze. However, Natsuhi could do nothing but tremble, her clenched fists quivering. Kraus quietly broke that powder keg tension. Natsuhi, leave your seat. You should go cool your head. What? Natsuhi, resenting that. The fact that her husband had not come to her aid shifted the focus of her attack. Dear, don't you understand what they're saying about you? These people are baselessly calling you a traitor to Father. They are making light of the fact that we protect the glory of the Shiromiya family, even though we are constantly expending every effort to earn that glory from Father. They trample all of that underfoot with their hateful rambling, and you don't even try to fight back. Why? Why, I'm only standing up for us because you won't. But you've been putting the entire burden on me for some time now, and now you tell me to go cool my head. It's always me. Even though I have always considered this family's affairs so seriously, you've... Natsuki was already unable to hide her tears. She flew from the room in that state. After that, all that remained was a somewhat embarrassed mood around the parlor. When the sound of footsteps grew distant and silence returned, Kraz shrugged his shoulders slightly. I apologize for my wife. She has always been bad at controlling her emotions. It's even been rough for me. If that's what's been managing your household, you must suffer to no end, Nii-san. Madame, it's nothing. Leave me be. Natsuki flew into her room and threw herself onto her bed, lamenting. Those heart-wrenching sobs reached Kumasawa in the hallway. Poor Madame Natsuki. There is a deep enmity between her and Eva-sama. Explaining the relationship would be very trying for me as a woman. The Ushiromiya family holds blood in high regard, but if a woman marries and leaves the family, they are normally removed from the family register. Thus, under normal circumstances, Eva-sama should have been removed when she married Hideyoshi-sama. However, there is no one deserving of blame in this matter. The madam certainly bears no guilt. There's nothing to call it other than a whim of God. Kara-sama and Natsuki-sama were not blessed with children for some time. After all, this is the male-dominant Ushiromiya family. A wife is merely a tool to create an heir. If such a wife cannot fulfill her only duty, she will not even be treated as a human. It pains me to remember how the master tortured Madame during that time. Back then, a wedding between Eva-sama and Hideyoshi-sama was being discussed. Eva-sama was sly. Taking advantage of Madame's inability to become pregnant, she gained the favor of the master. She inspired him to allow her to marry and give birth to a successor herself, making sure to avoid transferring her name out of the Ushiromiya register. There was a vast difference in the Ushiromiya hierarchy between Madame, who married into the Ushiromiya family and was treated like an outsider, and Eva-sama, who is related to the family by blood and whose husband took on the Ushiromiya name. Furthermore, Eva-sama actually gave birth first, and to a boy. As for how much weaker Madame's position was than Eva-sama's, well, I believe you could see for yourself. I'm sure Madame is tormented by the thought that if only she had gotten pregnant earlier, the master wouldn't have accepted Eva-sama's request to keep her last name after marriage, and Eva-sama wouldn't have been permitted to act as arrogantly as she did today. However, that was not Madame's fault. All of the blame lies with God's whims and the stork that delivered Jessica late. Even so, Madame wouldn't allow herself to see things this way. She probably can't help but cry bitter tears as a woman at her inability to carry out the duties expected of a wife. Ah, how sad. I cannot do anything except watch over her from the shadows. We crossed the hall again on our way to the entrance. As we did, we once again spotted that witch's portrait. However, spotted is probably not the best word to describe that experience. It was more like our eyes were inexorably drawn to it. That woman's eyes with their sage-like glamour definitely had the power to make those who viewed it stand rooted to the spot. So this is the witch Beatrice. I wonder if that story is true. Ooh, Balor doesn't believe? Back when he had asked what this picture was, the first person to tell him had been Maria. Therefore, when Balor showed signs of doubt, Maria must have felt that Balor didn't have faith in her. Of course, that wasn't what Balor meant. Maria ran up to the portrait and began banging on a plate hanging below it. Maybe the title of the portrait was written there. Maria, trying to prove that she wasn't lying, obstinately continued to hit the plate. Sorry about that. It's not like I doubt anything you said, Maria. Balor believes. When he patted Maria's head and apologized, she seemed to accept it, sticking out her chest and proudly oohing. What's this? My beloved witch Beatrice. Behold the Sweetfish River. What's with this weird, huge epitaph? The plate did have the title of the portrait written on it, but it was much too big to contain only that. Beneath the title was what appeared to be a long epitaph. If you just skimmed over it, several unnerving words would jump out at you. Incredible, isn't it? Grandfather had that made. Pretty deep, huh? I know. It's the place where the gold's hidden. Wait, is that the story about the Ushiramiya family's hidden gold? Now there's another thing I remember from long ago. Hold on, Aniki. Is this for real? Grandfather had this made, but he never said anything about this picture or the epitaph. Even so, amongst the family, it is often whispered that it indicates the location of grandfather's hidden gold, and that he will relinquish the inheritance and the gold to the person that solves the riddle. Oh, I heard that too. Lots and lots of gold. Well, something like that. Something like 10 metric tons of gold bars. I think it's fake though. Still, when you read about an epitaph like this, it almost seems real. I think I already explained grandfather's upbringing, but let me also mention the Ushiramiya's family's legend of the gold. Grandfather succeeded the Ushiramiya family after it was destroyed in the Great Kanto earthquake, and by successfully riding the stormy seas after the war, he managed to accumulate great wealth. That much of the story everyone knows. However, this is where the strange part begins. Part of it involves grandfather's black magic obsession, so its credibility is extremely low, but, well, wait until the end before you doubt or make fun of it. After the war, grandfather correctly predicted what the future would hold and won in a huge gamble, accumulating a vast store of wealth. But there's a mysterious legend about how he gained his initial funding. Grandfather came from a branch family and had no connections in the business world or the financial world. Even though he later built connections with the occupying forces, he supposedly started as a nameless person who hadn't yet gained anyone's trust. It takes trust to gather money. There's no way anyone would lend money to someone they didn't trust. How did grandfather, who had no reputation at all, manage to obtain his first vast chunk of funds? When asked that question, grandfather supposedly answered like this: "On a certain day, I encountered the golden witch Beatrice." Grandfather then went on and on about his continuing research into alchemy and techniques for summoning demons in order to become a great magician. And the entity summoned as the result of that demon calling ceremony was the golden witch Beatrice. He then apparently made a contract by which he would receive fortune and honor in exchange for his own soul. The witch then granted grandfather 10 tons of gold. Grandfather used this gold as collateral to prepare a vast quantity of funds, which he then used to multiply his wealth many times over and revive the Ushiramiya family. It seems this story is so old that even our parents were told it when they were still children. So back when our parents were young, they explored this island in all sorts of ways, believing that the gold grandfather had received from the witch might be hidden somewhere. However, since there was the danger of them getting lost in the abandoned forest, grandmother began to spread the story that the witch lived in the forest and approaching it was forbidden. I remember that old story. When we were little, we also went all over the island searching for treasure after our parents told us about it. Didn't we get lost in the forest once and start crying until some of the servants found us? Our parents got so mad. Dang, that takes me back. We sure were idiots, weren't we? After all, grandfather only bought this island after using those funds to get rich, right? That means he must have had the gold before coming here. There's no way the gold's on this island. That's not necessarily so. Maybe the gold was hidden on the island from the beginning, and he bought this whole island just to ensure that it would be his and his alone. There was a whole 10 metric tons of it, right? It seems more realistic that he'd try to secure the place where it was hidden, rather than try to move it all. This epitaph was made 2 years ago, and since grandfather wrote it himself, Yeah, it does make the legend of the gold seem more believable. The so-called witch's gold that revived the Ushirimiya family weighed 10 tons. Maybe that's sleeping there, ready to be turned over to whomever can solve Grandfather's riddle. Maybe that's why he did it. I guess that sounds like Grandfather's style or something. If that's true, that's pretty incredible. The epitaph carved into the plate was very mysterious, with something like a poem or a song written on it. That text was incredibly disturbing, filled with signs of Grandfather's black magic hobby, and its contents were in truly bad taste. But it could definitely be viewed as a puzzle which, if solved, might lead to the hidden gold. Whether that's what he intended or not, I can't even imagine what his true motive might have been. All we know for sure is that Grandfather put this shady epitaph here so that everyone in the family could see it. We also know that he's hinted at the existence of the gold without ever talking about where it might be hidden, at least so far. These facts were then embellished by the imaginations of our parents, who were convinced that Grandfather was challenging us to a battle of wits. Sounds just like my dad, so greedy that he'd take something like this seriously. He may laugh at Grandfather's black magic obsession, but he'd still believe the story about the hidden gold. It just sounds so good. Well, it's certainly not a realistic story. At that time, when Grandfather was still nameless and had no connections, there was no way someone would just lend him a massive quantity of gold bars for free. If such a person actually did exist, it's not unthinkable that Grandfather would call such a sponsor a witch. Yeah, but it's 10 tons, 10 tons. If you cash that in, how much would it come to? I mean, it would have to be a ridiculous amount, right? It certainly would be a ridiculous amount. They say that the total amount of gold mined by humankind since the dawn of history is 100,000 metric tons at most. That 1 in 10,000 of all gold humankind has obtained through history should belong to just one person. It's insane. On top of that, the witch supposedly had all that gold collected in one place and was able to lend it to Grandfather just like that. We're not talking about any ordinary person. Well, to me that 10 tons number still seems pretty fishy. After all, no one's ever seen it except Grandfather, right? Even if we assume that some generous witch existed and lent him some gold, maybe it was closer to 10 kilograms than 10 tons. Even 10 kilograms would be a pretty incredible sum, right? Ooh, 10 kilograms of gold is how much? Maria, who wasn't following the story and felt like she was being spoken to in riddles, sorry, finally found a place where she could ask us a question. It was a question I also wanted answered right then. Whether it was 10 kilograms or 10 tons, it still felt like a huge amount, but I had no idea exactly how huge. George Aniki folded his arms and tried to remember the market price of gold. Well, even the value of gold is affected by the market, and the value of physical gold can change depending on its purity and the trustworthiness of the foundry. You'd also need to pay handling fees to cash it in. However, that doesn't change the fact that it's a precious metal, and some people estimate that humanity will mine all the world's gold within half a century if gold mining continues at its current rate. Just guessing haphazardly, I think you could expect a price of about 2 million yen per kilogram. Well, just now I randomly said 10 kilograms since it sounded smaller, but even that would be worth 20 million yen, wouldn't it? Ooh, I weigh 28 kilograms, which means that if we had Maria-chan's weight in gold, we could estimate it's worth at over 50 million yen. That's just unbelievable. How much would 10 tons be then? 10 kilograms is 20 million yen, which you'd multiply by 1,000, so 20 billion yen? What the hell? How much is 20 billion yen actually worth? We can only measure it relative to our own pocketbooks. Anyway, let's say that a person's wages over a lifetime are about 200 million yen. You grow up and work like crazy, sacrificing your life for your company, and you're finally freed as you approach old age. Everything, including retirement money, might add up to about 200 million yen. In other words, that's the amount of money that'll be made throughout a human's life. No, you could even call it the value of a life. So 100 times that sum is an unbelievable amount of money. If you work from age 20 to age 60, that's 40 years of work. So it's equal to 4,000 years of work wages. If you worked every day starting from the Jomon period, you'd only reach that number about now. Ooh, is 20 billion yen a lot? Heck yeah, it's a lot, Maria. You love shortcake, right? You could buy more shortcake than you could possibly eat for the rest of your life. However, while that might be possible with 20 billion yen in cash, I don't think it would be very realistic to have that much in gold bars all in one place. Just as I said, gold is extremely heavy, so it isn't exactly convenient as a method of storing wealth. Sure, you can imagine someone gathering their fortune together as incredibly high-value stocks or precious gems. You often hear of people who traded their wealth for precious gems so that they could carry it around with them during the chaotic times of the war. But you don't usually hear stories of people exchanging their wealth for gold. It may be heavy, but it's the most trusted and stable form of wealth internationally, so maybe that was important. For example, bonds are just scraps of paper if the whole country goes under. You can also look at it that way, but even one 10-kilogram ingot is pretty heavy to carry around. Haven't you heard? A 50-kilogram person can't carry a 50-kilogram bag over their shoulder. With that many gold bars, the amount of labor and risk for one person would be hard to calculate. So what you're saying is, while it would be one thing if you had a stack of banknotes worth 20 billion yen, 20 billion yen in gold would be a big mountain that practically would be kind of pointless. That's right, although the legend of the gold does have a pretty interesting ring to it. Just the part about the 10 tons of gold makes it pretty much impossible. If you think about it logically like that, it sounds obviously fake. Kind of brings you back down to reality. Anyway, that's grandfather for you. Maybe he exaggerated the story of how some kind wealthy person gave him a loan by saying he got 10 tons of gold from a witch. Even the number 10 tons feels pretty symbolic. You mean like his gratitude for the money he borrowed was worth 10 tons of gold or something? Maybe some rich man's leisured wife generously granted it to grandfather, and maybe he started calling this person a witch. I see. Jessica's example isn't bad. Someone who generously lent a huge sum of money to grandfather when he had no reputation might as well be called a witch. Furthermore, grandfather actually did use that money to build a vast amount of wealth later on. The fact that this person was so great at judging people might also justify calling her a witch. Also, since she went to the trouble of lending all that money, she might have enthusiastically overseen how it was spent. The decision to unexpectedly get involved with the occupying forces and profit from the Korean War demands might have been inspired by the witch herself. That might explain why he had claimed to have received both wealth and honor from her. I see. So, in other words, this witch lent grandfather the funds necessary to revive the Shiramiya family, and he owed her big time, and then he felt so grateful that he had that huge painting drawn and displayed. Yeah, it's not that crazy of a story. It's even possible this person was an old granny who looked like a witch. Maybe grandfather idolized her and that's why he had her drawn to look so beautiful. Ha! I'll bet if we ever did meet this person, she wouldn't be even nearly this pretty. That's possible. The name Beatrice sounds pretty Western, and if you think about how everyone in our family has Western names, maybe even the name Beatrice is a result of grandfather trying to rearrange some Japanese person's name to make it sound Western. I get it. That means this pretty girl doesn't exist outside the picture. Guess that means I won't be able to rub those elegant breasts. In the first place, isn't having a witch pretty bizarre by itself? Like, you could find something like that anywhere on Earth. I laughed and made fun of the witch, trying to distinguish myself from the kid I was 6 years ago who feared the witch of the forest when Maria tugged on my sleeve. I could tell by how hard she pulled that she was upset. What is it, Maria? Beatrice exists! Maria stared up at me. She had on her usual sour look, but I could tell she was angry by the color of her eyes. Witches exist! Witches exist! Ooh. Well, sure they do exist if you turn the TV on and watch anime or something. Exist! Witches exist! Ooh. I started getting impatient, not knowing why Maria was jumping on me like this. Then Jessica tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, "Dumbass, you're smashing a kid's dream. Maria really believes in things like witches and Beatrice exist." Come to think of it, Maria-chan, in social studies at your school, when you asked what you were what you wanted to be when you grow up, you wrote a witch, didn't you? Maria nodded seriously. Tears started to run from the corners of her eyes. I see. To a girl who wanted to become a witch in the future, the existence of Beatrice was proof that witches do exist in this world, and was therefore an image that she yearned after and admired. Exist! Witches exist! But Balor-kun still doesn't believe. Oh, it's okay. Witches do exist. I believe it. George Aniki kneeled down and hugged Maria's head. Watching this, Jessica poked my side. So that's what it is. It's like shouting that Santa Claus doesn't exist in front of a child who believes on him on Christmas Eve. I'm not the kind of guy who likes to shatter kids' dreams. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to make fun of your dreams. I apologize. Beatrice does exist. Even now, she's living in the forest and comes into the mansion every night to peek in and see what everyone's doing. So you shouldn't go into the forest at night. You mustn't stare into the dark forest. You might be seen by the witch of the forest, Beatrice. After all, grandmother said so. Really? Balor really believes? Yep, I believe. Sorry for doubting it. Come on, let's make up. I stuck out my hand, Maria grabbed it with her tiny hand, and we made up. Maria didn't grumble any more than that, so George, Aniki, and Jessica were relieved. Oh, so this is where all of you were. I was sure you had just left to go to the beach. Shannon-chan, carrying a basket, was surprised to find us all gathered in front of the portrait. Shannon, well, this is the first time Balor has seen Beatrice's portrait. He was just fascinated by it. That's right, it certainly is fascinating. Beatrice-sama is truly beautiful. I'm sure that she captivated the master. In addition to the patron theory, there's also the theory that she was grandfather's first love. Either way, although it's been several decades since he met her, even now she holds a special place in his heart, which must mean that he's still captivated by her. Sheesh, that must have made grandmother pretty jealous, huh? I'm not really sure, but that might actually be true. Apparently, grandmother believed that he was cheating on her with some blonde. Oh, good smell coming from Shannon. Maria, sniffing, approached the basket Shannon-chan was holding with interest. After hearing that, I noticed a fragrant scent with a touch of vanilla. I apologize. I was told by Kumasawa-san to bring them to everyone. What is it, I wonder? Oh, excellent! Cookies! Oh, wanna eat cookies? Please, eat as much as you would like, but, would it be appropriate to serve cookies in a place like this, in front of the portrait? Shannon-chan sent us a glance that seemed to ask what we wanted to do about it. Well, yeah, I guess eating here would be bad manners, generally speaking. Maria, why don't we eat someplace else? Let's put the cookies in a bento and have a picnic. Ooh, have a picnic. If we can eat cookies, let's go. Yeah, let's go get some fresh air. We shouldn't stuff ourselves right in front of the witch. That's right, didn't we say that we wanted to go down to the beach in the first place? Let's go. Shannon-chan, sorry, but could I ask you to get us a blanket to sit on and some flask of tea? Right, certainly. Shannon-chan received her instructions and gracefully bowed before retracing her steps. We headed for the beach on our own. Everyone headed for the entrance in a group. Feeling as though that witch was staring down at our backs, I turned around once more. Ooh, Battler, you still don't believe? No, I believe. It'd be so much cooler that way. The golden witch Beatrice gave grandfather 10 tons of gold, and that gold might be sleeping around here somewhere. Besides, didn't grandfather write that strange epitaph as though challenging us to find it if we can? I'd say that kind of adventurous story is way better. 20 billion yen worth of gold, huh? Even if we split it up between the four of us, that's still a ridiculous amount of money. 5 billion yen for each of us. Incredible! With that kind of money, you could probably make any sort of business prosper. In fact, we could live our lives fabulously without working at all. Ooh, I don't want 5 billion yen, I want cookies! Haha, Maria would take the cookies over money. Still, 5 billion yen, that's like a dream. Ridiculous. Is it possible that you all truly believe in Father's legend of the gold? Of course we don't believe that story about a witch giving him gold, but there's no mistake about the gold itself. The fact that Father obtained gold bars from an unknown source has been confirmed in several ways. We've heard that before the president of the Maruso company died, Father showed him a large pile of gold somewhere. Father used that man's claim as proof that there were 10 tons worth. That's just the nonsense of a senile old man. Along with father, he was just fabricating a story. You can't take it seriously. If that gold didn't exist, he wouldn't have been able to gather so much funding. Before the president died, he was a person with such a sincere personality that he earned the respect of many in the business world. He wouldn't have become a partner to such fraud. Aniki, the president of Maruso definitely saw it. 10 tons of it, clearly, with his own eyes. Even more, Dad let the president take one ingot at random and have it examined. The results of the examination show that the 10-kilogram ingot was 99.99% pure. He said that the Oshiromiya family crest, the one-winged eagle, was imprinted on it. Almost instantly, the Oshiromiya family legend of the gold spread amongst the fixers of the business world. Gold from an unknown foundry has a poor rate of conversion into money. Thinking that it was a chance for decisive profits, they accepted it as collateral, and as a result, Father was able to receive massive loans. Is there no limit to the absurdity you're willing to accept? How old are you people? Are you still taking that nursery tale you heard as children seriously? Where is the proof that this 10 tons of gold even exists? Aren't you just parroting the lies of Father and a few of those close to him? Of course, it's just a story, but still, Aniki, the amount of money Dad raised required a suitable amount of collateral. Even if the gold itself was just a rumor, it's an undoubtable fact that he showed them a treasure of comparable worth. It was just an illusion of money created by our penniless father. He acted as though he actually had gold that didn't exist, fooling his sponsors. It was probably the gamble of a lifetime. Luckily, his use of those funds proved successful. If the Korean War demands hadn't come and the Ushiromiya family had not been restored, Father would probably been hounded after as the crook of the century. So, are you saying that the gold never existed and Father made it all up? Of course, and because of that, the illusion of gold became a mere inconvenience once he'd achieved enough success. That's why later on, Father added all that about a witch and black magic, weakening the credibility of the entire story. In other words, he revealed that the illusion of the gold was a fabrication. If he claimed to have received the gold from a witch, no one would believe that it existed at all, right? It's also possible that he said it for all of your sakes. Nevertheless, here comes some stupid offspring wanting to divide up this non-existent gold, along with the rest of the inheritance. Rosa, don't tell me even you believe in a fabrication like this. I can't prove whether or not Father really had the gold. I just want to claim my rightful share as one of Father's 4 children. Oh, it seems even you have started to talk that way, Rosa. I see, so that's what you're all getting at. You're trying to claim that I'm attempting to keep all the gold for myself. Nisan, you've gathered a massive supply of funds. That's a fact. If we rule out the possibility that you've been embezzling Father's personal funds, then there's only one possibility left, right? Aniki, we've been thinking that you might have found those 10 tons of gold bars. Ridiculous. Such a thing never existed in the first place. Then explain yourself. Was it embezzlement of Father's assets or Father's hidden gold? How could you have gathered so much funding if not by one of those methods? Even I have many friends in the political and financial realms. I have earned their cooperation, nothing more. And on that matter, I have no responsibility to explain myself to you. You understand, don't you? There are some topics that ought not be spoken of. If you insist on that point, that's all well and good for now. But Aniki, Dad doesn't have long. Nobody can ensure that he'll live to see this day next year. The inheritance process will begin at the instant of Dad's death. We'll arrange for lawyers and accountants who are impartial to all of us and have them inspect Dad's financial situation. At that time, if it comes to light that you've unjustly interfered with Father's money, you understand, right? I don't have a clue what you're talking about. You're starting to make me feel as indignant as my wife was. Of course, Father's gold is just part of Father's fortune. We understand it's money you can't reveal openly, but the 4 siblings should have an equal right to it. In other words, we're gonna have your financial situation investigated as well as Dad's to determine whether you're hoarding the gold or not. Isn't this a great opportunity? Right now, prove the existence of your so-called support from friends and acquaintances. That way we can sportingly apologize for foolishly doubting you. Right, Rosa? That's right. Krasny-san, you're the one who's dodging the issue. If you were guiltless, you could just prove that you were in the right, but you aren't even trying to do so. However, Aniki, we still have to consider your position here. As Dad's representative, you're probably bearing a larger share of the burden than we are. We've been living terribly relaxed lives until now, so it wouldn't be fair for the rest of us to complain without taking your efforts into account. Oh, it seems you cannot make up your mind whether to flatter me or slander me. Please get to the point. Basically, randomly investigating nitpicky aspects of father wealth seems like a pretty crude way to go about it. As you said, Krasny-san, there may have been movements of money that are difficult to explain. We've come to consult with you today while fully aware of that point. Both sides stand to gain from talking about this now. A consultation. Oh. When the inheritance is divided, you'll be rewarded for your years of hard work taking care of Dad by an agreement that's generous in your favor. Don't misunderstand us, Nissan. We aren't saying that we'll abandon our rights, but when we make our claim for what we deserve, we might as well offer a generous understanding for your position. That's what we mean. In other words, if you accept our conditions, then when the inheritance is divided, we'll leave the investigation of Father's financial situation to you, Krasny-san. All of the siblings from Ava downward suspected that Kraus was trying to steal their father's wealth, so letting Kraus report the state of that wealth was extremely contradictory and a huge concession. If, as they claimed, Kraus was actually embezzling money, Kraus would be able to hide that fact. Besides which, it'd be possible for him to control the distribution of the inheritance in a manner favorable to himself. Kraus, realizing this sounded too good to be true, couldn't help but feel suspicious. He couldn't help but worry about what they'd ask for in exchange. Oh, after mistrusting me completely, you now say that you're willing to restore your confidence in me as the eldest sibling. So what is it you want in return? Just what we deserve as siblings. You aren't the kind of person who'd steal Dad's property, but you also aren't being financed by some patron. Considering all that, there is a certain explanation that would satisfy the rest of us. Nissan, you found 10 tons of gold and used that as collateral to gather some funding. Yes, just like Father did in the past, right? If that's the case, there won't be any funny business in Father's finances. You've always been a good son, looking after Father. Why do we mistrust a person like that? You're being so roundabout, I can barely understand you. Please speak in clear and more practical terms. Our first condition, Aniki, you must admit that you found Dad's gold. Are you asking me to admit that I possess gold that doesn't exist? Our second condition, you'll acknowledge that each sibling has a right to a share of the gold, and you will pay out those shares. How foolish. With that non-existent 20 billion yen of gold, that would be 5 billion yen per person. Are you telling me to pay a total of 15 billion yen? Ridiculous. Keep listening till the end. We know that much money can't just pop up out of nowhere. We're not asking you to make an impossible deal. Of course, regarding the portions of the gold, we plan to reward you plenty for your hard work until now. Our third condition, the portion of the gold to the one bearing the successor to the Ushiromiya head family will be 50%. The remainder will be considered the fair share of the siblings and divided up. Of course, this also includes you, Krasny-san. Of the 20 billion, 12.5 billion will go to Aniki, 2.5 billion will go to Eva-ne-san, 2.5 billion will go to me, and 2.5 will go to Rosa. That division scheme makes me so grateful I could cry. So you're saying for the sake of the gold that doesn't exist, I must pay you 7.5 billion yen. What's wrong? Nissan, your share is 5 times the size of ours. These are such good terms, I'd be jumping for joy. Our fourth condition. The gold will be liquidated and distributed along with the inheritance at the time of father's death. However, as a deposit, 10% of our portions are to be paid to us promptly. These payments must be made before March of next year. What do you think, Kraus Nissan? This is an ideal chance for you to restore the trust regarding your handling of father's assets, isn't it? Of course it might be impossible to get a whole 7.5 billion before father dies, but it should be possible for you to manage a deposit of 750 million, right? Paying 700 million in half a year might sound like a pain, but you should be able to manage it with all your friends in the political and business spheres. Normally we'd hope to receive the 7.5 billion right now all at once, but out of concern for you, we'll show our sincerity by asking for only 10% of that for the time being. The remaining 90% can wait until the inheritance is distributed. See? Even you'd be capable of managing a mere 10% to show your sincerity. So, you're trying to sell me the right to access father's financial situation for 700 million yen, 750 million yen. How impressive. You all certainly have grown. To think that I'm now the one being offered deals. Nissan, if you accept those terms, the rest of us siblings will leave the investigation of father's assets to you. However, the results of that investigation will be subject to scrutiny. It's only natural, right? We'd be so sad if you managed things so that our 7.5 billion share shrank. We'll avoid complaining as the general rule, just make sure you do it neat and tidy. As long as you don't try anything that's blatantly obvious, we've got no intention of stirring things up. We want our inheritance quickly, too. We don't want it to get all drawn out and left hanging. If a complaint is made, who would carry out the follow-up investigation? We don't mind if it's you. This is probably the first and last chance for us siblings to reach a consensus. I believe it will come to that. Looks like even you can speak up every now and then, Rosa. By this point, it's obvious that Kraus wasn't at all trusted as the oldest sibling, so there's no need to go into detail. The formerly tyrannical oldest brother had always abused his privileges and violated the other siblings' shares. It was in response to this that the other three, now adults, were finally teaming back and striking back for the first time. Sorry, but there's more. Our fifth condition, this decision must take precedence over father's will. Later on, we don't want some will to appear and make this decision completely irrelevant. I see that you're very cautious. Then let me ask, if this gold really were found, what would you do? Since you'll be making payments to us for what the gold's worth, the rest of us really don't care if we ever see the gold or not. You can just think of our shares as an advance payment. It's good to have dreams, isn't it? You plan to turn this island into a resort, right? You might stumble upon the gold by chance during construction. Ava let out a high-pitched laugh. Kraus watched, but didn't even flinch. Let me add a seventh condition before I accept. In the situation that any sibling other than myself finds the gold, they will immediately turn it over to me. Yes, of course. We'll hold onto it for you. It was a play on words. Of course the others who were forcing Kraus to pay money for some non-existent gold wouldn't save Kraus's portion if they'd actually found it. From the beginning, this deal had been nothing more than a threat directed at Kraus. Regardless of the actual facts, it was still extremely likely that Kraus was embezzling his father's assets. When Kinzo faced death at last and had his inheritance distributed, some unpleasant facts would surely come to light that could easily become fatal to Kraus. The others had spotted this weak point and were threatening their brother under the veil of compromise, trying to wring a huge sum of money out of him. However, they had forgotten one thing. They'd forgotten that their brother's brain moved so swiftly, at least when it came to cunning and guile, that they'd been forced to band together to combat him. While Ava couldn't stop smiling sure of her victory, Kraus let out a gloating laugh to show how relaxed he was. This all makes for such a touching story. My estrangement from you all has left a deep pain in my heart. If accepting these conditions means we siblings can become friends again, it would please me to no end. I'd be happy to agree to your deal. Rejoice, Rosa. We have reached an understanding. Rosa's expression dimmed. It was never a good sign when her brother started talking like this. Ava also keenly picked up on this. That's why she was unable to wipe away a sense of unease. Even though Kraus had obediently accepted the deal. My, how obedient of you. It's not like you at all, Nissan. What a cruel thing to say. Are you implying I have some ulterior motive? Of course I don't. I'm just the same as all of you. Just the same as all of you. He seemed to emphasize that one part. The color of Rudolph's face darkened. To him, it sounded as though Kraus was saying, I have a plan similar to yours. So Rudolph panicked. He rushed to bring this nearly resolved discussion to a conclusion. Then we're good. So, Aniki, would you mind signing here? This is a written contract summarizing the discussion we've just been having. There's one for each of us. Everyone will sign the same contents. Rudolph took 4 written contracts out of his breast pocket that had the details of their deal written on them. The 7th condition you proposed will, of course, be added right now. Don't worry about that. Aniki, need a pen? Rudolph took a fountain pen out of his breast pocket and offered it to Kraus. Kraus made as if to accept it, but then, with a small laugh, he drew back his hand without taking it and spoke. Actually, in order to ensure that this agreement is properly executed, I'd like to propose an amendment on just one point. As soon as Kraus said that single sentence, all of the siblings felt as though something ominous was creeping up their backs at the same time. That won't do. We've already decided, haven't we? Just stay quiet and sign it. Why are you in such a hurry, Ava? Of course we'll sign. I promise the share of the gold going to all of you will be 7.5 billion yen. I also promise that when father's inheritance is distributed, I will cleanly and neatly liquidate it. However, there is one point that I simply must insist that you compromise on. What are you talking about? What don't you like? The part about promptly paying 10% of your share, 750 million yen. As you pointed out, my financial situation is far from prosperous. While I can guarantee that I will collect on various future investments, I must admit that I am quite poor at the present moment. In short, I have absolutely no money that I can move around right now. I am incompetent and my business sense is dull. Since I am the loser you all claim me to be, I just don't have the power to move 750 million yen in just half of a year. That can't be true. Are you trying to deceive us with such a half-baked trick? At the time of the division of the inheritance, I will liquidate everything at once. Remove the condition that I must pay you 10% in advance. That is the only condition under which I am willing to sign. Kraus, Nissan, that 10% is nothing more than a number to measure your sincerity, isn't it? All things being equal, you shouldn't have any room to negotiate at all. We're doing you a huge favor by offering to let things slide for just 10% in good faith money. Now that we've explained that, you rejecting our offer would seriously damage our trusting relationship, right? Hideyoshi had a humble expression on his face and was rubbing his hands together, but his eyes weren't calm at all. Kraus had already seen through to the shadow in the depths of those eyes. Why are you all in such a rush? Or could it be that you're afraid of something? Rosa, won't you tell me alone? Secretly, so the rest of the siblings can't hear? It's not as though I... Quit it, Aniki. All we're asking is whether you're gonna sign or not. Just forget about making any strange deals or any other suspicious moves. Oh? You say I have no room to negotiate? Are you trying to claim that I am in a weak position, which therefore puts us in an unequal relationship? Shivers began to crawl up Rudolph's back. He began to feel himself getting overwhelmed by the height of his brother's completely insurmountable wall. and the long shadow that had existed since they were children. Shouldn't deals be made between those on even footings? From my perspective, this deal will help restore the long-lost trust of my younger siblings and deepen the love between us. It's an old problem that's been eating at me, and one I would prefer to resolve as soon as possible. I would be overjoyed if we could resolve it today. However, it seems I'm not the only one who'd be quite glad to close this deal quickly. Am I wrong? Kraus stared at each of his siblings. They avoided his gaze with animal-like instinct. Only Hideyoshi was slow in avoiding it, so he was caught by Kraus's gaze. Hideyoshi-san, I hear your company has been doing extremely well lately. At a brisk pace, it went public, and both its track record and its stock prices have soared. I am truly jealous. We aren't here to talk about my husband. However, it is unfortunate that you have neglected your stockholders. It's even more unfortunate that you were unable to solidify your base when you became stock listed. Before you realized it, some bad-natured colleagues of yours had bought up a huge share of your company's stock, right? How could you know about that? The same way you knew about me. If it's possible to collect evidence proving that no one would offer a loan to me, then it's possible for me to collect evidence on you. Haha, is it really so unexpected as that? Kraus grinned broadly. In contrast, Hideyoshi's face was rapidly turning pale. Hideyoshi's company was a restaurant chain management company that he'd started from nothing. Thanks to Hideyoshi's management efforts, the company had achieved success repeatedly, expanding its range, and a petition to make it a stock-listed company had recently succeeded. The greatest advantage of being in the stockholding system is that you can sell stock certificates and gain a large amount of financing. That amount tends to be far greater than a business' normal profits. So this is an extremely effective way to gather massive funds to expand a business even further. However, in exchange for financing the company, the stockholders gain certain rights. They've given rights that allow them to observe and guide the company they've invested in, leading to profits even greater than their original investments. This right is guaranteed to the stockholders, and they sometimes use it to dismiss ineffectual management. The right allows them to keep an eye on management and prevent the money they've invested in the company from going to waste. However, if they use it forcibly, they can eject the former management and take over the company. After all, dismissing management and nominating new management are powers held by the general body of all shareholders. That power is determined by the majority decision of the stockholders. And people who hold more stock get to cast more votes. In other words, if some person or group hold a majority of the stock, they can freely chase out the old management and make the president anyone they'd like. If they want, it's also possible for them to make themselves president. Most companies take various defensive measures to stop malicious people from buying up their stock and threatening their position, like ensuring that lots of stock is bought by those close to them, such as company employees. However, Hideyoshi's company had only recently become stock listed, and he hadn't had time to strengthen those defensive measures, or maybe Hideyoshi was so engrossed with the management of his company that he couldn't properly understand the dangers of being stock listed. It's hard to say whether or not he should be viewed as a kind-hearted manager immersed in the work of management, or a foolish manager who had his feet swept out from under him. In other words, there existed some people who wouldn't let him get away with that naivety unscathed. They began repeatedly buying up stock in Hideyoshi's company, rapidly gaining such strength that they couldn't be ignored. They then sent anonymous documents to the shareholders in an attempt to gain control of a majority. The document read, "The current management continues to make pointless investments and is ignoring the needs of the stockholders. Let us force the current management to retire, cut the current wasted investments, and let this company be born again as one that gives more back to the stockholders." It's very difficult to make the actual state of a company's management known. The fruits of Hideyoshi's sleepless nights and constant concern for his company were cruelly distorted, and he lost the trust of the stockholders. Thanks to his efforts, this group had almost collected a majority of the company's stock. At that point, even Hideyoshi noticed and started to buy back the stock, but the stockholders realized the company was undergoing an acquisition maneuver, and each demanded a ridiculous price for the shares that Hideyoshi was trying to buy back. They continually tortured Hideyoshi, who had no leeway in the negotiation of the price. One of the certainties of capitalism is that the price will rise when two parties vie for the same thing, and one of the certainties of democracy is that the majority controls everything. So in the end, whoever manages to buy up the most stock wins. Put another way, whoever has the most money wins. Unless Hideyoshi could obtain a large sum of money at this critical time, he could easily lose all that he had built so far. Therefore, more than anything else, he wanted a lot of money right now. He couldn't wait for the division of Kinzo's inheritance, since no one knew when he would die. And you, Rudolph, have been quite a lot of trouble lately, too, haven't you? You always hear people say it's terrifying overseas, but it seems it really is true. American trials are settled quite emotionally. They never hand down generous judgments to foreigners. Weren't you advised by your lawyer that making a settlement with the other party would be more economical in the long term? What's this all about? Well, it's just some trouble from work. No big deal. Nothing you can't settle with money. Kyrie immediately guessed the meaning behind the subtle expression on Rudolph's face. Her husband had gotten up in some kind of trouble without her knowledge and had been worrying over it alone. That's right, in this world, anything can be settled with money. After all, it can even buy back the broken bonds between siblings. America is very fussy about the violation of rights, but with money, anything can be settled. Long live capitalism. Though, rumor has it that the settlement money could be as high as several $1 million. Rudolph had been building a large amount of wealth with a certain type of niche industry. However, a niche is a niche. It definitely wasn't a business exposed to the light of day. An American corporate giant was trying to accuse Rudolph's company of violating their rights. For various reasons, it was thought that victory for Rudolph in this trial would be extremely unlikely, and he was being forced into an all-out surrender. But even so, there was a way for this to be resolved with money. If he could just pay that money, it might still be painful, but he'd be able to pick himself back up. But if he didn't pay, he'd lose everything. Therefore, more than anything else, he wanted a lot of money, right now. Rosa, you're a good and noble little sister. You wouldn't get yourself involved in a dangerous money game. However, your soft-hearted nature has brought you trouble, hasn't it? In my opinion, becoming a co-signer for anything isn't something one should enter into lightly. That's none of your business, Krasny-san. Rosa uncharacteristically laid bare her emotions and yelled. After all, no one was supposed to know that. As Kraus watched, he let slip a muffled laugh. Without exception, every one of them, more than anything else, wanted a lot of money right now. In other words, the situation had been reversed. After all, the person the younger siblings were threatening was the only one who had no urgent need for a large sum of money. The other three, however, wanted a lot of money quickly, no matter the cost. In other words, the longer it took to establish this deal, the better position Kraus would be in. Kraus was extremely sly. He had known of their Achilles heel from the beginning. Even so, he had not been certain. Therefore, he had hidden this knowledge until the very end, striking back only after analyzing their attitudes. If it were possible, I would like nothing more than to raise some money for my adorable siblings in their time of need. But unfortunately, I have nothing on hand. If you know of any sponsors who might be able to raise a whole $750 million, I suggest you try there first. Kraus's elated words were so obviously detached from what he actually felt. The other siblings could do nothing more than listen, grinding their teeth. If they could think of a sponsor that convenient, they wouldn't have kept up this charade. They had entered this huge battle specifically because they had exhausted all other options. However, if you do insist on relying on your big brother, I wouldn't mind using my influence to help you find such a sponsor. Oh wait, I do believe that you said I have no influence. Well then, I'm afraid I won't be much help to you. Kraus's low, gloating laugh began to fill the parlor. The younger siblings, who had been driving the oldest brother into a corner until a moment ago, could do nothing more than grimace and grind their teeth. Ava, don't make me laugh. As if I'd ever put myself in your debt. Don't make me laugh. Don't make me laugh. If we relied on you, how exactly would you help us? I told you, didn't I? All I can do is find other sponsors for you. Of course, I will negotiate for the highest interest rate possible. Damn you, taking advantage of us. Honey, please calm down. I am calm. I'm extremely cool. You bastard. Kyrie grabbed her husband's hand, but that action made him feel even more pitiful, so Rudolph shook it off. Kraus laughed as though watching something highly amusing. In times like these, it certainly would be nice to find Father's hidden gold. If you did, you could split it up into 2.5 billion yen portions right now. How sad, how sad, how very sad, how extremely, totally, truly, hopelessly sad. Tonight, let us all drink together as we solve the riddle of Beatrice's epitaph and discover the locations of Father's hidden gold. If we four friendly siblings work together, there is surely no puzzle we can't solve. Okay. It's a good time to stop. Thanks for watching. I'll pick it back up shortly. I thought that we could get back to blood and so on, but this is where the emotional drama begins. Once we got past that opening.